This video is going to be a contract update for Texas real estate agents. If you're not from Texas, don't watch this. Do you remember this workflow from back in August? I bet you do. And guess what? It's irrelevant now. So let's get into it. Hey everybody, I'm Bren Brewer, your favorite tech training broker, and today we're going to go over the new changes that take place or took place on January 3rd. So now you can take this workflow, I know it's complicated, and pretty much throw it out the window because we're not going to use any of that anymore. So if you head over to TREC, you can actually see the redlined contract. The contracts are available. They're on TREC, they're on HAR, they're in DocuSign, they're in Dotloop, and they're in zip forms. But I wanted to go through and show you exactly what has changed in this contract and actually how you will use it. So pull out your 1 to 4 and I'm going to show you. This is the redline version so you can actually see the changes. So here you see in blue, they've added the date here. They've also added geothermal under natural resource leases. They're removing the date here and putting it here. And then if you just keep scrolling, you'll see a lot of changes. So under paragraph 6C, under the survey, you can see that because the T47 is being changed from an affidavit to a declaration, where we have both now, you can do the affidavit that has to get notarized, or you can do the declaration that doesn't need notarization. So because of that, they've added that here, that you can use the affidavit or declaration. And then they've removed the language if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit when the time prescribed. And then they have added if seller fails to furnish within the time prescribed both the existing survey and affidavit or declaration. So it says buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense no later than 3 days prior to closing date if seller fails to furnish within the time prescribed both the existing survey and the affidavit or declaration. It says if the title company or buyer's lender does not accept the existing survey or the affidavit or declaration, and then they've removed these lines, buyer shall obtain a new survey at, and you choose expense. So that is what's added to C1. And then C2, they have taken out shall and put may. Buyer may obtain a new survey. And then it says if they've added if buyer fails to obtain the survey, buyer may not terminate the contract under paragraph 2B of the third party financing addendum because the survey was not obtained. All right, then we'll keep going. Under Tidewaters, they've removed the sentence that says an addendum containing the notice promulgated by TREC or required by the parties may be used. That's been removed. Of course, the date's being removed and put here. And then under public improvement districts, they're removing an addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract because not all properties are in an improvement district, so we don't always need an addendum. Same with the propane gas service area, they've removed that as well. They've added certificate of mold remediation. It says if the property has been remediated for mold, seller must provide to buyer each certificate of mold damage remediation issued under this code, occupations code, during the 5 years preceding the sale of the property. So if it's been done in the last 5 years, they have to provide that to the buyer. And that's going to be in the contract now. And it says required notices. They're removing MUD, WCID, PID notices and adding, for example, utility, water, drainage, and public improvement districts. And then it says seller's failure to provide applicable statutory notices may provide buyer with remedies or rights to terminate the contract. That is what is being added. We'll move on to the next page here. Under brokers and sales agents, paragraph 8, line B, they have added brokers' fees are not set by law and are negotiable in bold. Let's keep moving. Settlement and other expenses. Instead of saying expenses payable by seller, they're saying seller shall pay the following expenses. And this is where the change comes in on the compensation here. So it says seller shall pay the following expenses. And we have A, B, and C. A is releases of existing liens, including prepayment penalties and recording fees, release of seller's loan liability, tax statements or certificates, preparation of deed, 1/2 of the escrow fee, and then brokerage fees that seller has agreed to pay and other expenses payable by seller under this contract. So not much has changed there. But in B, it says the following amount to be applied to brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay. And you can either mark a flat fee and put that amount there, or mark the second box and put a percentage of the sales price. You'll check one box only. This is where it gets tricky. You will only use 12A B if there is not cooperating compensation, meaning the seller has agreed only to pay his agent, the listing agent, and you want to negotiate the commissions into the contract, and your buyer does too. Then you'll either put your flat fee or your percentage that goes in there that you want covered, and we will go down the road as a negotiation in the contract. If the seller has agreed to pay a fee to the listing brokerage, and then the listing brokerage is also splitting that fee with the buying brokerage, then you will need the compensation agreement between brokers. That is a whole different document, and that looks like this: the compensation agreement between brokers. This is only if there is cooperating compensation. If there is no co-op compensation, then you're going to put the amount in the contract. If the buyer is paying the compensation to their brokerage and agent, then you will put nothing here if they don't want that credited to them at closing. If you have any questions, make sure to put them down below in the comments. I know this gets a little tricky. Now let's move on to the rest of the changes. So like I said before, we're not going to use any of this anymore. We're not going to use addendum regarding broker fees. We're not going to do the compensation agreement between broker and owner. We're only going to use the compensation agreement between brokers and or the 1-to-4 family contract. So we only have two options now. Okay, so we have removed in 12A1C that seller shall pay an amount not to exceed. So it doesn't say seller shall pay anymore. It just is going to say an amount not to exceed, and then you'll put a blank to be applied to other buyer expenses. So they're taking out all the verbiage between there, and it's just going to be to other buyer expenses. So this is still going to be the blank 12A1C, where you would request a credit to the closing cost for your buyer. Number two, they're adding the language buyer shall pay the following expenses, and also that brokerage fees that buyer has agreed to pay. So this is basically looking back to your buyer rep agreement, because the buyer agreed to pay things that are in the buyer rep agreement, like your compensation. All right, let's move along to the next changes. They're taking out tax, and it's just going to say federal requirements. Again, the date. And then here on number 22, they've added the addendum for section 1031 exchange. They have removed the version number and changed it to the correct version number. And then on page 10 of 11, remember this is not a part of the contract because it is a disclosure. It says that there in the paragraph. It says pursuant to a previous separate written agreement, removing language here that needs to be removed. Listing broker has agreed to pay other broker a fee, and then you'll put it in of the sales price. So this is when you're using the compensation agreement between brokers, and you would put that here. So if you've got the compensation agreement between brokers, you would fill this out with your fees as well. This is a disclosure for everyone involved, especially the title company, so that they know where to put things on the settlement statement. Other than that, that's all the changes. So throw out that workflow. If you have a copy, you're going to use the compensation agreement between brokers and the 1-to-4 family contract if there is cooperating compensation. So let me know in the comments below if you like this change, and does it make it easier for you to negotiate your commission if the seller is not offering it. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.